Happy Thursday afternoon, or any of the day of the week that you may be listening to this on. Welcome to The Wounding of Dorn. I don't have any specific topic in mind for this talk, but I wanted to just kind of process. I just wanted to speak freely. Addiction is kind of a oh, here, you know what, actually, rather than talking about addiction, because I could probably make another very long video just talking about addiction. It is a labyrinth of a human experience. I wanted to reflect a little bit on my psychedelic journey, because I feel in terms of my healing and my growth, the effect that psychedelics have had in my life cannot be overstated, in that psychedelics have opened my eyes to a lot of really negative, really harmful behaviors that I was doing. And it also put me in touch with a lot of feelings of pain and disgust and sadness and grief that prior I was misinterpreting through my ego as being myriad physical problems. Like I didn't realize that I had emotions. I thought it was all an illusion, or that's the way that I interpreted my experience. I was very much so lost in this web of defense mechanisms, this kind of sea of words and interpretations, that I kind of lost touch with reality. I was delusional. I was interfacing with reality through a construct, a false construct, or a false self. And psychedelics helped me see past my false self, all my egoic defense mechanisms, and into the wounded and authentic self that I have and that I am. And this is an active process of reintegration of my true self. It's not a binary thing, and I think that should go without saying. But psychedelics have been very, very important for me personally. Historically and culturally, psychedelics in various forms are a medicine in many cultures, and that's something that can be seen over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Here's I want to reflect on some experiences and some wisdom that I gained on psilocybin. On the nature of dissociation, this subjectively, what dissociation feels for me is there is this sense that I'm not in my body and that I'm not in my environment. There's kind of like a weird buffer or a disconnect between me and everything else. That's the way that it feels subjectively. And meanwhile, I'm in a place now where I'm healthy enough to acknowledge that this is a defense mechanism that I needed to establish. And it wasn't a conscious thing. It was also, like, it's part of the human fight or flight reflex. It's also, like, it's not something I chose to do, but it's something that happens. So this freeze response, or this dissociation where the body is preparing itself for death or to be hurt. So it disconnects from what's happening. But I was very much so blended with this dissociative part, and it felt very scary. This feeling that the world isn't real, or that I'm not real, and that I don't know what's happening. Like, subjectively, it's a very frightening feeling. And I lived in this state for a long, long time. I feel that, especially as I was like consuming lots of pornography, spending lots of time on YouTube and playing video games, but I wasn't really interfacing with my body. It's like egoically I was trying to engage with realities through a screen. But I was very much so trying to get away from myself. I was abandoning my body. I was abandoning my nervous system. I was abandoning my emotions. I was so desperate to go to a place, to run away. And so, like, taking drugs, for example, like weed. Weed very quickly became a problem for me. Not in the sense that I'm not interested in the debate of whether or not it's addictive. Although I do believe that if a person in need of a crutch will find one, or shall find one, in the sense that I think, you know what, the whole topic of addiction, it's another thing entirely. And so I'm going to kind of stay on track here. But so I had found many ways to live outside of my body. And one of the ways that I did that was I lived in my head. I was constantly daydreaming, constantly fantasizing, constantly overthinking, constantly analyzing, constantly like hypervigilantly trying to think about all the ways that I could come under threat or be attacked by other people. Not all of that was conscious either. It was kind of like my post-traumatic brain trying to understand what the fuck is happening. But my nervous system lived in a hell of threats, and I very much so blended with it. I lived in this dissociated state where I was constantly seeing the threats of my childhood everywhere. But I was blended with it in the sense that, you know, like a fish might not realize that it's in water or it's surrounded by water. But psychedelics helped me realize, metaphorically, using the fish and water analogy, that I was a fish and I was surrounded by water. And that I was experiencing something, not that I was experiencing a distortion rather than experiencing things as it was. But so more on dissociation. Um, what what psychedelics confided in me, or the wisdom that I interpreted from some of my psychedelic experiences, is that dissociation is the buffer that overwhelming experiences, as in memories that exist in the body, are lost. As in, like, for example, memory is not just in the brain. Memory is not just cognitive. Memory isn't just a story, but it's also its presence of self, its presence in this world. And if you're someone with me who has lived with sexual abuse and sexual assaults that were so horrific, so overwhelming, that to live with those memories and still live in the environments that they happen, I live every day in the room. I go to bed at night, every day, every night, in the room where I was sexually assaulted 10 years ago. I live in a different bed. My room looks different, but I'm in the exact same room, and I live with my stepfather. I live with my mother. So my body, through dissociation, has created a buffer, a divide, however you want to call it, wherein the true memory of my life, where I've been and what I've been through, is lost. So I can interface with reality and omit these overwhelming traumatic experiences. And so the dissociation is a way of skipping over or bypassing the trauma in my body, but meanwhile still allowing me to function. But memory is presence. That was one thing. Memory is presence. Memory is knowing where you've been, what you've been through, feeling it, honoring it, having it integrated into a full person, knowing who you are and where you've been. Memory is presence of body, not just presence of mind, but it's a connection of self. It's having yourself, loving yourself, accepting yourself, surrendering to yourself. And that was a very profound experience. The consequence of that, or one of the reasons why, like, that sounds like a very great thing or a very honorable thing, but it's also very painful to live with those memories, to try and figure out how to process them, the grief, the overwhelm, the disgust, the helplessness, the powerlessness. Learning to live with those emotions is so difficult. And that's why I'm in this position I am now, where it's like I'm constantly fighting myself. The way that it feels is that I'm fighting myself. Every step of the way, I'm fighting myself. I'm clawing tooth and nail away from my true self. I'm trying to turn a blind eye from the overwhelming pain that I feel. And I'm trying to figure out what to do with this shame and this rage that I feel. This blood curdling rage I feel that makes me feel like I want to kill my stepfather. I want to cut him to pieces. I want to rape him to death. I want to make him hurt the way that he hurt me. I want to enact violence upon him. I'm learning how to live with this rage because I've had to stuff it down. I've had to suppress it. I've had to push it away because I'm dependent on him. I'm dependent on my mother. And I have brothers. And I have brothers. Half brothers. His sons. And I could never hurt them like that. I would never do that. And that's a choice. I like to think that if I were to murder my stepfather in cold blood, that the angels would rejoice and God wouldn't even glance in his direction. That my vengeance would be righteous and fueled by pain and innocence lost in my childhood at his hands. But I realize, and I'm partly motivated by to say this because I don't want people to think that I'm actually going to harm anyone. That's not going to happen. So rest assured. But it's important for me to be able to talk about this very real sense of rage and violence because it's there and it's here. And that's something that I felt a lot of shame about before, where it's like, how could I think about harming my stepfather? But realizing when somebody assaults you, when somebody rapes you, when somebody harms you, when somebody strips that kind of power and control away from you, makes you feel like you're nothing, a part of you is going to want to retaliate. And that may not be true for everyone, but it's certainly true for me. I speak for myself. That's my truth. I'm here and I'm speaking my truth. Other wisdom I was able to glean from psychedelics. There is an ability in the body to process trauma. Sometimes I get triggered into flashbacks where I still feel like I'm in danger, like my stepdad could burst through the door and assault me at any moment. Sometimes I feel that way. Sometimes I feel very afraid that I'm still being raped and I don't know about it. That's my trauma coming up. And because the way that trauma is stored in the body, and this is the way that I understand it, the way that trauma is stored in the body, in the nervous system, it's like a charge, and it's so overwhelming that the ability to really articulate when it was happening, what happened, like those logical senses of like, okay, this is what happened, this is when it happened, this is the story, and I'm not in that situation right now. Your ability to logic your way through it disappears because of how overwhelming it is. And so outside of flashbacks, I'm more or less grounded, but I still feel a lot of fear. I still am processing a lot of fear. But one experience I had on psychedelics was I was consoling myself. I was consoling myself and telling myself that there was danger, that there was helplessness, that there was violence, but that it had passed and that I am safe, or at least safer than I was, that I'm not in the trauma of being raped. But there was this deep wisdom where meanwhile I was laying in my bed on 5 grams of mushrooms, and I was feeling this trauma in my body. I was feeling this fear. I was feeling this terror that was precipitating a flashback. I sat with it and I consoled myself and told myself that it was over and that what happened was a long time ago and that I'm not there anymore. And that was something intuitive. That wasn't something that I read about, but that's something that I felt, that my body knew how to do. Psilocybin allowed me to get in touch with that part that already exists in me, exists in the human unconscious or subconscious. But it was there. I remember in one flashback where I was completely dissociated from my body, where I was aware of what was happening, but I had disconnected from myself, where I was experiencing horror and terror that was gut-wrenching and terrible, but I was able to console myself as if I was a person talking to myself. I told myself how proud I was and how brave I was and how much I loved you, how much I loved myself. Because meanwhile, I was experiencing my child self being raped, being violated, being harmed in such a violent and ugly way. I couldn't see the visual, but I felt the tear in my body. I felt my lower back, my abdomen clenching like iron collapsing into itself, balling up so tight it could explode. My back felt so tight. It felt like it could burst, like it was caving in on itself. And I was consoling myself as if I was an angel talking to myself. And other wisdom I've gleaned from psychedelics is being able to access memories of, say, like alters, as in like I'm going to use dissociative identity disorder terminology for this, but I've experienced knowledge or wisdom that felt like I was somebody else. I was somebody else and I was coming into myself. Like I was watching my ego dissolve, and underneath was this person, this human being, this identity, this truth, this existence that was unbeknownst to me. That I, like, even right now I still live in this quasi dissociated state where it's like I'm talking about abuse that I don't remember somatically happening. I can talk about this abuse without it bringing me like emotions, and that's the dissociation, but I can talk about it narratively. I can't describe what happened because I don't have the memories, but I know that it did happen. I have partial, fragmented memory of the violence. But psychedelics gave me an ability to kind of see what I think are alters, or kind of like other personalities. They have different names. They have different purposes. More so the names. Like I remember I was confronted with one character, Mr. Grimm. Mr. Grimm spoke with an English accent, and he had a certain way about him. And he would come and visit me. Mr. Grimm would come and visit me as a child. And I remembered that. I remember the concept of self. The wisdom that came to me, or that what I said was on psychedelics to myself, because a lot of this is a lot of my mushroom experiences are solo. It's with myself. I'm by myself, in the room where a lot of my trauma happened. So I think that's frankly probably why I have a lot of flashbacks. Um, um, but one thing that another wisdom that I gleamed on psychedelics was that the self is having, the self is loving, the self is like, the self is something that's yours. It's something that it's yours. and nobody can take it from you. And because of sexual violence and abuse that I suffered in childhood, that's what I felt like I lost. I lost touch with my truest and highest self. A divide had to be formed so that I could survive in an inhospitable environment, a desolate environment where safety wasn't assured. I needed to distance myself from my emotions, my vulnerability, my sense of righteousness, my sense of self. I needed to do all that in order to survive. That's what it felt like. And that was a very painful experience. And it's still a painful experience. I think I've said plenty for the sake of this video. I want to thank you again for being here, for listening. I wish you all of the best. Feel free to drop a like, leave a comment, leave a message in the comments if you want to ask questions or if you want to share your experiences. Please feel free to interact. And thank you again. Take care, and I hope to see you soon.